Hi again, it's Professor Lusheen with our Research Methods course, week in review and preview for the next week. Here's a comparison from last week to this week. We got the quiz, we got the discussion, we got the assignment. I do an overall grade comparison as well. I like to track performance and see where I need to help out. And what we found is the overall average and median time did decrease slightly, though not as much as you see on the screen because there were some outliers. If I kick them out, it actually got a lot closer. The discussion posts did decrease a little bit, but not too much, less than one per student. The quiz and assignment scores did decrease as well, but the discussion scores increased. So, and I think that everybody's making that final decision on what they're going to be focusing on. So I think that everybody's focus has kind of been more on that than maybe the quiz or fully the assignment, though the assignment is associated with it. The office hours were very well attended this week. Half the class showed up, which phenomenal. Great job, everybody. And just to let you all know that this semester's progress is right on schedule, right where I thought you'd all be, and that you should continue with your literature reviews. I saw some really great ideas and some great descriptions and justifications in your assignments this week. First, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about the quizzes, because I did talk about it in week 1. On top, so quiz 3, the average was 78, high was 100%, low was 40%. The average time was about just under 8.5 minutes. Compared to quiz 2, where the average was 84%, the average time was about 8 minutes and 26 seconds. But that's really crazy how close it is. Week 1, it was just under 9 minutes, and you all had scored a little bit better. So I hope that you're kind of gaining some insight into how to perform on the quiz. You get to take it twice. And even though you don't know which quiz questions you got wrong, you know what's being asked. So I would assume that there's some form of improvement from try 1 to try 2. What I should have covered last week were these 2 questions. I like to discuss quiz questions where we have under 80% getting it correct. So the top one, we just had 42% of the class getting it right. Primary purpose of completing a thorough literature review as part of a research study is to become an expert. I've been trying to say that time and time again, that you have to define what is known about that subject so that when you propose your research questions, it's attempting to get into the region of what is not known. So that's really what this literature review is all about. Next one, 58% got this right. The best way to organize a review of literature is thematically. So based on what was found. Whether it's discussing a variable, they're calling that thematic. But yeah, as it relates to your question, that is definitely the best. Don't do chronological. Those are automatically no. Critically, but if you're just focusing on the flaws, what you want to do is you want to educate the reader on what you learned during your literature review. For quiz 3, we had 60% get this one correct. Replications in experimental research are generally conducted to facilitate. The proper answer is, or the correct answer is, external validity. I would say that's probably the best answer, though in some ways you could investigate internal reliability and validity, but it's for external. So that how does it apply to the outside world or to other things? That's external validity. Replication attempts to do that. Let's see, this person, her findings may be due to extraneous, uncontrolled variable and not the treatment Marcy is most concerned with. Internal validity. Yeah, so the design of the experiment itself. Is the design of the experiment really going to get you what you're proposing it to? And if there's an uncontrolled variable that you can't really account for, your internal validity is shot. The next one, 56% got this right. This was asking about a researcher's instrument, asking people about their self-reported degree of political conservatism on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they completed a questionnaire as well, probably to compare the two. It's probably this first question is probably the qualifier for which group you'd be in for the test, for comparison rather. Results show that people who identified themselves as political conservatives or higher on the list also the highest scores on the questionnaire. Okay, yeah, so that's one way of indicating that, yeah, that's the characteristic where people scored higher. This is an indication of criterion validity. Is it measuring what it's supposed to? Sometimes we call that reliability. We've had a lot of questions about this. the two subjects, as you can see here, and this may be helpful because they change the language from time to time. Under curriculum group, it's responsible conduct and research. The course title is responsible conduct and research, and it's just the basic stage. And then down here, under the curriculum group human subjects research, it's the social behavioral educational, again, it's the basic. So those are the two you need to complete. It says it's due, I think, this week. Try to get it done this week because we just covered human subjects, and I'd like to put this assignment to bed. But I can extend, I can give you more time, but don't put it off because eventually you just won't have time because you'll be focused on your paper. So try to get it done. I say by, week 7 at the very latest. Try to get it done this week. By Sunday if you can. I'd appreciate that. If you need more time, just email me. I had a lot of questions in the office hour about what is the difference between context and scope. So thought about this a lot. And I'm doing my grading today, so I thought, how could I compare it to what I'm working on? So let's say that I was proposing or interested in whether, if UW-Whitewater wanted to grow their online degree, you have to realize that students should gain practical knowledge and skills while perceiving the experience as valuable or enjoyable. Otherwise, why would they continue on? There has to be something to lure them in. I also did a search on this, and it got some indication that that asynchronous delivery, which is self-study online, creates more access and flexibility for people, so a greater range of people can sign up for it, but it lacks the dynamic and organic interactions that supplements lesson plans and provides alternate perspectives of topics to assist students with understanding and connection. So the thing you want, you can't typically get from an online class. So I started asking the question, does a live but virtual discussion supplement the advantages of online delivery with the dynamic and organic interactions and therefore improve student performance? That's kind of what I'm interested in. That was my research question. The context, to try to get you, this is how you would relate to it. Do traditional classroom students demonstrate greater learning over their online counterparts? Logically, we'd say yes. And there's research out there that says, indeed, if you can compare the two. But if you can't, like in the situation I'm in, my scope becomes, does participation in a live WebEx session once per week improve student assignment scores and course activity? So what's interesting about this is that, the context is how you would relate to it, kind of a broader topic. This doesn't just apply to just online degrees or just the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, though that's where I'm looking at it from. But I get it much narrower here, the scope. So what's it focusing on? It's focusing on participation in a live WebEx session once per week. And does it improve? What's interesting is I have the data, so I analyzed it. Now, does it? The answer is not a definitive yes. It's a sort of. And so what I did is I ran t-tests. I was going to provide a diagram. What a t-test does is it takes the overall average and standard deviation, or the overall variance, and then it separates it into groups. And it looks at those groups means standard deviations and finds out if that particular variable that separated the groups from the general population is significant, if the tails don't cross over as much, if you're thinking of it from a normal curve or normal distribution. And the purples is where we have significance below 0.05. Now, this is a t-test in which I said we do not have equal variance, and I also said that it's a two-tailed test. So this is the most stringent of tests, and I did that to try to reduce error, so false positive, basically. And what I found is, yes, there are some. And I broke this up by weeks 1, 2, and 3. I have 3 groups. Group 1 are students who participated in both office hours, so the 1-week discussion. Group 2, in just one of them. In group 3, none of those students participated. So we can look at all kinds of things like the time spent. It's lowest for those in group 3. The touches were lowest, and this is for week 1. The posts were close to 2, and if you keep looking, you see it's kind of a consistency here that this group, the people who had not participated in the discussions, tend to be posting much lower stuff. Whereas group 2, 1 and 2, there's actually places where group 2 has higher scoring or higher performance, and that's just had participated in 1. But we can also look at the consistency over time. So this is a within group study or comparison, whereas if I was comparing a live class to an online class, that would be between group, because they're 2 very separate treatments. These are the same treatments with one classification to separate the groups out. But what's interesting is, if they started as high performers, did they end in high performers? So they went from 94 in week 1 to 93 in week 3. They went from 85 and stayed at 85, but actually came up a little bit. Started at 92, went to 88. So, this is a very small sample population. Difficult to extrapolate too much of what we found here. But yes, we do have improvements in assignment performance for groups 1 and 2 against group 3. And that's what we've seen here, both in assignment overall, quiz and assignment in week 3. So yeah, it does. Not perfect. You'd probably want to do it over several semesters. It'd be nice to have a control group and in classroom, but all right. So for all of you, as you move forward, so this week you're going to be submitting in your assignment your proposal, and I'm either going to approve it because it looks like you've got it down and ask you to keep working on it, or I'm going to give you specific feedback, critical feedback, helpful feedback to move forward, and maybe ask that we meet. So one thing you can do, and I did it for what my exercise I just shared with you, is to take your question and type it into Google and find out what's out there. Is there already an answer? Some of you already have answers because in the assignment this week, I took your question, I Googled it, and I gave you the answer. Others, you may just want to try it and just see what pops up. You may find justification that you didn't know of before, because it's usually from a government document, or it may source something else out. Find, publish research, and dissect it. That's what you should be doing now. As indicated in the quiz question review, that a literature review is making you the expert. So you have to become the expert based on what's published and not what you've experienced. Because some of you are still relying pretty heavily on your own personal experiences, your professional experiences. It's got to come from the literature. And now that was a very difficult transition for me, but it made all the difference. Most definitely. And make sure you're tracking your work. So this is the assignment for this week. Here are some samples. I have some sample proposals from the last 2 students that I assisted with their thesis work. I've got 2 interviews here that are very insightful. One is from one of the students who completed her work. Her project went awesome, and so you'll get some good insights from her. So go ahead and access these and see what they look like. You'll see what it looked like both when they took this class and also what it looked like right before they did their actual data collection, which is when they take 789. I want to remind you that this is not about creating a perfect proposal. It's about justifying a research study based on the literature. And so you develop the skills and the critical thought in getting there. And that's why this class is so practical in its design. So basically I'm just looking for you to demonstrate your ability to think critically and use applied research. I think that's all we got. If you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I am going to be sending out a WebEx invite for a second office hour, which will be Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Central Time. So there'll be one at 8 a.m. and one at 8 p.m. So hopefully you can attend.